need to, and it goes back to asking stupid questions, being prepared to ask the stupid questions and look not like the most informed person in the room, but also importantly, nowhere near the most stupid person in the room because you're the one that's asking the question.
Well, the stupidest person in the room is the person who doesn't know and won't ask. Or even worse, who doesn't know and won't ask and acts like they know. That's not good at all.
There's from your...
See, that's part of that idea that you should love your enemy. So you might say, well, why should you do that? Well, your enemy is going to be your harshest critic. Now, it's possible that if you have a very good enemy, that he will show you flaws in your character that you didn't know were there. And so it's a very strange way of looking at the world, to think that you should welcome an attack. But this is right. I'm saying that with all due caution, let's say. The more vicious the attack, the more of your potential hidden flaws might be revealed.
Have you found that to be true?
Oh, definitely. But I've also found that attacks force you to contend with it, to see if it's there, right? To test it. I suppose the attacks that have come after me that have been most successful, they're almost always journalists. And they're usually British female journalists, but not always.
We produce a nation of hard-hitting journalists.
Yeah, well, and faith in journalists is the lowest in the UK and anywhere in the Western world. And I can see why, but there's some advantage. There's some real advantage to facing someone. It's a Pharisee problem. In the Gospels, Christ was always contending with these Pharisees. And what the Pharisees were always trying to do was to lay a verbal trap for him. So
is a Pharisee a person?
Pharisee was a Jewish sect.
Okay.
And the Pharisees were very legalistic in their interpretation of Mosaic law. And so they were hypocritical, the way they're portrayed in the Gospels. And they're hypocritical by the book moralists. And most of their morality was for show. They liked to pray in public. They liked to be seen being holy. At least that's the criticisms that are levied against them. And what they're always trying to do in the gospel accounts is to lay a verbal trap for Christ so that they can expose him as a heretic and kill him, right? So every single thing they say is a snare of some sort. And there's lots of journalists like that. Nellie Bowles, who wrote an article about me for the New York Times, which was a very devastating article in many ways and very serpentine and subtle. 3 years later, she wrote another article about what it was like to work for the New York Times when she was working there and the tricks that the journalists played, including her. And she said that the game was to devastate someone else's reputation in the attempt to boost yours, right? So you could think about it as a game of comparative moral standing. So the journalist's trick is to trick you into saying something that will end your career, essentially.
Their social status stands on the shoulders of yours.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so now the advantage to being in a situation like that is that you have to if you step extremely carefully, and you're fortunate, then you evade the traps, and then the interview tilts hard in your favor.
Yeah.
And so the interviews that have done me the most good in the long run were the 2 interviews that were most hostile. One by Channels 4,
Griffin,
Kathy Newman.
Kathy Griffin.
And Kathy at least had a sense of humor. Another one by Helen Lewis, who had no sense of humor at all and doesn't seem to have learned anything at all in the interim.